Time for Book of Experts TV.
Topics you love.
Experts you trust.
Friction-free referrals.
Tried,
tested,
Trusted.
This is Book of Experts, brought to you by salesman.me.
It is time for bookofexperts.tv. I'm excited to be back because, today we're going to be talking about a topic that will be of great interest to our community. We serve expert-based entrepreneurs, and we know a lot of you are also parents. And this past year has been, wow, like what have we just gone through for a lot of you? Disruption, right, left, and otherwise. But we're actually going to talk about not just what's been happening in the past, but the future of education. So our guest is going to be coming on. We're going to talk about how entrepreneurs think about education, including this is the guy and the group of schools that Gary Vaynerchuk said, this is how I would do schooling as well. So let's dig into that. I'm going to welcome on our guest, Matt Beaudreau from Acton Academy Placer, or actonplacer.com. You can find out a little bit more. Welcome, Matt. Excited to have you on because this topic, I am a parent, 5 children, one of them that we're actually unschooling now. And I know from the conversations that we've had in this past year with everything going on with the pandemic and school disruption, this is a topic that's on top of our community's mind. We have a lot of entrepreneurial parents out there. Mm-hmm. I really want to talk about where you're going as well, because the future of education, I think as entrepreneurs, we see a lot of stuff that we do differently. And I know you've got your hands in the mix on that. So can't wait to hear more about that.
You bet. It's my favorite thing to talk about. So I'm definitely glad to. And you're right. It is top of mind for everybody. We've, across the network have said that this is really, this pandemic has been kind of this emperor has no clothes moment for entrepreneurs all over the world. We've been doing what we've been doing here for a little while now, and everything's been going well. And this all of a sudden, is really just shining an extra light on it. And I think it's a good thing for everyone. So excited to talk about it.
Matt, can you set the stage for us, if you would, a little bit about how you got to what you're doing? Because folks may not be yet familiar with the story, but a couple highlights that I want to share, and then you can talk about how this has all come together. But over 280 locations globally, with people like Gary Vaynerchuk raving about the work that you're doing. What is your background and what happened before the world turned upside down a year ago?
Yeah, great question. So, and you're right, Gary is singing our praises. Seth Godin is very vocal at this point, saying Acton Academy is all that makes sense. Damon John, we've got a number of people who are pushing forward for good reasons. So, personally, I've come out of education, so I understand the education game, and I use the word game very, very intentionally. So I understand it very well. I was a public school teacher, a public school administrator, private school teacher, private school administrator, have worked in universities, Stanford included, and worked with universities all over the world. So I know the K through 12 and the quote unquote higher ed game very, very well. I've worked in a number of capacities in those games, which is precisely why I left those. Having children of my own, and knowing what Acton Academy was all about and kind of where that was going, it was a no-brainer for me that we need to be a part of that network and really be a big part of pushing that forward. And my other job, so to speak, over the last 7-8 years has been as a keynote speaker and consultant for Fortune 500s around the world. And so what's really cool is I'm going to the biggest companies, Amazon, Google, Netflix, Microsoft, Lockheed Martin, Purina, whoever, and I'm hearing from them exactly what they're not getting from young people, what they wish they saw from their recent college grads, and they're not seeing it. And I can take that back to our schools and just help inform exactly what it is that we are doing. So, I always tell people I'm very, very biased, but you can also be biased and not be wrong. And I think that's the case. We are, in my opinion, the best schools globally, period, end of story.
How does it actually work? So you have the physical campuses, but how are you able to be in over 280 different schools? Are you? I guess I'd like to understand a little bit more. What is the academy structure? How much of it is virtual? How much of it is the infrastructure that runs a school on a day-to-day, from principals all the way through to the janitors and the teachers in the hallways and classrooms? But how did you get to this point and built out to that extent?
So here's how, so we really are a network. So when I say network, people, the closest thing people are related to is a franchise. It's not a franchise. We are a network of individuals who very much not only believe in building this better model, but we believe in doing so together. So it's a continuous feedback loop where, I was on a phone call on my way to work today with, a gentleman who runs the campus in Malaysia. And we're talking about some of the same kind of things. And I also liken us to CrossFit a bit, where you've got individuals who are running individual boxes, but we're all speaking the same language globally, right? We're all talking about the same equipment. We're talking about the same workouts. So what we've essentially done is we've created systems that allow for young people to flourish. And the adults on those physical campuses, we've had to go virtual a little bit because of this pandemic. And that's been up to the individual locations, by the way. We've been here at the campus that I'm currently at. We've been full bore for almost this entire year, and everything's been fine. So, but it's about the systems. You mentioned the teachers, the janitors, the principals. What we do is we have systems in place so that all of those positions you just named, well, they're actually the students. So we've created structures where what we tell people is our ideal day is no adult shows up. The students don't care. It doesn't matter. And they still go forward to have a productive day. And that sounds cute and it sounds cliche, but it is so ridiculously real. And so we have got structures and systems in place to where the adults can set forward these systems. They start handing over powers and responsibilities to the young people, and the adults get to step back more and more and more as the community grows. And that's why we've been so successful and been able to spread. The adults that are here on this campus right now know that their mission is to become irrelevant as quickly as they can. And as soon as they can become irrelevant, we're going to move them to a different location to then do the same thing.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
Scary and interesting at the same time.
It's scary until you see it in action, and then you understand why our students are getting recruited straight from here in high school to go to six-figure jobs, because there are human beings don't usually look like they do.
How many of the schools in the network were existing schools that tapped into the Acton model, and how many of them are new schools that started from scratch with the model?
All new. All new. There is no way that a traditional school environment would convert. And that's usually systemically, if a traditional school is built as either a, obviously they're either a public school or maybe a charter, which charter is really just kind of a fancier public school, or it's a private school that usually models itself after a traditional school. None of which would transfer over. The hierarchy that exists in those traditional models, the top down, the adult authoritarian, none of those things are going to match. There's not really a way to meld those two things. All of these have started from scratch.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't realize that you guys had expanded that big. So what does that typically look like when an individual is looking at this and saying,
Yep.
Are they recognizing it for their children? Is that sort of the seed of Genesis?
It usually is, right? So we've got, you mentioned about 280 locations, right? We want to push to about 1,000 strong locations globally. We have applications in from around the world. I think we're up to about 17,000 applications in to open an Acton Academy. We will not do that. We very much control kind of that funnel and that filter of who is coming in. But we have found that the people who are most successful at joining our network and actually making this work, one of those kind of defining principles usually is they've got their own kids that they want to build. That's the why, right? Because make no mistake, this is a ridiculously hard thing to do. And you have got to be very, very vested. This is not a way to make quick money. This is not an easy, it is far from easy. So you've got to really be invested, and having your own child usually brings that level of investment.
Yeah, totally. I can see that.
Yes, sir.
at the point that a new location, I guess that's how you're describing it, a new
Yes,
Acton
sir.
Academy is coming online.
Yes, sir.
Can you walk through that on-ramp into the process? Because I think this is going to be fascinating. And for the entrepreneurs out there, I think this is what you guys are going to geek out about, because we're a lot of our entrepreneurs, they're quick starting, they're visionary, they see these ideas. So seeing it applied into the stodgy world of education is going to
Yeah.
amp up a lot of folks. And I want to hear the
Yeah.
specifics from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to. So, there's an entire, again, coming into the network, there's an entire audition process from the get-go. And we have people, go through different phases of answering. We want to get to know them. So we want them to answer some questions about, kind of their why behind all this. We have a series of books that we ask them to read and respond to. We have video auditions that they will, come online, and we want to get to talk to them and get to know them. So it's a pretty rigid process to get into the network itself. And then once you're into the network, essentially what you're coming into is all of the IP around how we even do this, how we make this happen. So you come into the network and you get access to what we call our tool shed, which is, quite honestly, every conversation we've ever had online, every Socratic conversation anybody on a campus has ever videoed and put out for critique, every small individual project, every large scale quest project. I mean, quite literally everything we have ever done is there. And all you are asked to do as you come in is download as much as you can. And in the process of you moving forward and all of us helping you move forward, you just share as well. If I create a project on this campus and we implement it, and all of our launchpad, which is what we call high school implements this project, I'm documenting that whole process. I'm mapping out, day 1 through day 30, what they did, what they didn't do, how this worked. And I am sharing all of that with the network. Everybody in that network can then take that information and go, okay, this makes sense. Maybe we'll provide this as an option for our young people, or maybe we won't, or maybe we'll modify it. All of those things are fine. But as you come in, that's really what you get, is this massive download. And so then we're just helping you learn to build the community, choosing the right people. I could triple the population of this campus that I'm on right now tomorrow if we just let our entire wait list in. But we have no desire to do that, because we need the right people here too. We need the right families here. So we walk you through, okay, well, how do you find the right families? What does the right family mean? What does that look like? And then what are the systems that you need to start putting in place so that students truly can learn to be self-directed and be personally responsible and actually run what essentially becomes a workplace for young people. That is a multi-layered process that we walk you through, depending on where you are, what your community is, what your influence is. There is no, here's what it looks like for every single person, A to Z. It's different for everybody because every community is different.
I'm typing a note in our comments right now, because I love that description of the school and the educational experiences being like a workplace for young people.
Yes, sir.
In the best possible way. We're not
Yes,
talking
sir.
about the negative connotation,
Correct.
sweatshops
Correct.
and things like that. But
Correct.
it is a different environment. The academic. So just as an aside for you, Matt, I didn't really share this, but my master's degree is in higher education.
Yep.
And so I came out of the educational world. And one of the reasons why I've been in the business space for the last 20 years, I think it's been now, is because it was so slow moving. And I enjoy the atmosphere that I'm in now. It's fast. We break things, we fix things, where it's very solution oriented.
Right.
I felt like I was going to die by committee when I was in the educational space. And so I love that aspect that you're bridging the gap. Mm-hmm. Can we talk numbers for a second? I still want to understand the model a little bit. How big is a typical, like, this is K to 12 age range?
It depends on the campus. So, because we don't say it's wrong if you only ideally want to have 30 or 40 students, right? Like, that's not, who's to say that that's wrong? If that's what you want to do, that's great. If maybe you want to stay, kind of at that number, and you ultimately want to go K-12 and you're just going to start elementary, that's fine too. It really depends on where you're at. But Many of the campuses do ultimately want to grow K through 12. An ideal for us K through 12 campus is probably somewhere around the 150 to maybe 200 student mark. That's really kind of the ideal size. You get any bigger than that, and you're probably better off actually building another campus.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So the clusters, it's kind of runs along that Dunbar's number, the 150, is a cluster, a functional cluster. And when it
Yes,
gets
sir.
too big, it becomes unwieldy.
That's exactly right. So, and that's real. So that's a huge part of the reason that we do stay roughly at that level. And by the way, the ideal, if you've got that 150 students, you probably got 2 adults.
Wow. Folks, I want, I don't think I have to say that again, but I think there were some people like eyes got big and double takes where because we know in the traditional school system that those that overweight of the administration level can often be the hardest part for our community schools. So
that's right.
Matt, I feel like we have a podcast plan. This is a short form today. I feel like we could be talking 2 hours on this subject. I love where you're going, but in the time that we have left,
yes, sir.
Would you take us, because of your position, because of the work that you're doing and what the data that you've been collecting, can you project out into what does the next 5 to 10 years look like in the educational space?
Yeah. So there's a difference between education and schooling. So I always want to make sure that is a clear distinction. Schooling is what schools do. That is what, your traditional K through 12. So I will tell you from being in that space too, that space, schools are going to just look more of the same. There's going to be more of a lockdown. There's going to be more of sometimes you're on campus, sometimes you're not, sometimes you're virtual, sometimes you're not. There's more of a focus on testing. There's more of a focus on an agenda being driven from a political standpoint. That is not going away. So if you're an entrepreneur and you've got your kids in a traditional environment, even if you're in the Midwest and you're like, well, we're not seeing it yet, you're going to. So there's school and then there's education. Education is moving towards self-direction. Education is moving towards the winners in society. And by winners, I mean those who are able to define what success looks like. They're able to move in a direction they want to go. They're able to build a life that they don't feel like they need a constant vacation from. They're not emotionally overwhelmed. They're self-confident. They're self-aware. They have all of those things. That is because education is around personal responsibility, and it's around the ability to know what your strengths are, to capitalize those, to focus on those, and the ability and really level of comfortability in adapting. We know all too well that adaptation is a need now. It's only becoming more of a need every single year, no matter what industry you're in, right? So the ability to be comfortable with not just teaching yourself how to learn anything. So like learning to learn, I can teach myself if something all of a sudden becomes relevant, but I'm also comfortable with unlearning, not getting stuck in tradition and saying, well, this is the way we've always done it. That's a death sentence for schools. It's been, as you know, it's a death sentence for businesses. And most of my corporate clients, if they're stuck in that mode, they're gone. Welcome to Toys R Us, welcome to Blockbuster, right? So having young people who are outside of that bubble and have that kind of thought, that's where education is going. So we're seeing Acton is truly taking the lead from a global standpoint on pushing that forward. So Acton will continue to grow. I think you'll see universities shifting to that modality too. Big universities will close. There will be mergers. Universities will shift towards not just being a degree mill, but they will be they'll offer certificates of expertise to allow people to focus. You'll see an explosion of trades. You'll see an explosion of these small pods. You'll see an explosion of homeschooling and unschooling. All of this will just astronomically increase over the next 5 years.
And to bring this back around to where we started, this past year kind of shined the light on, as you called it, the emperor has no clothes. And we all see it, and we're all finally acknowledging it, that there's some problems out there. So I love the fact that folks are thinking about this out of the box in a different way, thinking about outside the academy even, right? A whole different way of looking at how do we solve this and to make the adults irrelevant. They can step away and the kids take over. I think that says it all about what you're putting in place.
It really does. If you think about it from a parental standpoint, you said you have 5 kids. You don't want to have all 5 of your children being in their 30s and 40s living at home. You want to have provided them enough leadership and ability so they still want a relationship with you, but you're no longer making the rules. They are out functioning in society. They don't need you at that point. That's what we want for our students too. School is not designed to do that. School is designed to keep you handcuffed. So we are releasing those handcuffs to allow those people to go forward and build a life that they're excited about.
This has been great, Matt. I think we've got a lot of folks, like I said, entrepreneurs and parents that are in our community that are going to sit up and take notice, and they're going to be checking you out at actonplacer.com. What was the other, the Apogee website. Can we make sure we get that in there too? And I'll put it in the comments.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's Apogee Strong. So APOGEE strong.com. And that is the mentorship program, the global mentorship program that Tim Kennedy and I have put together and are running for young men around the world. And there is crossover there. Everything I do from my podcast to Apogee, all of that feeds back into the Acton network, and there's crossover there altogether. So yeah.
Awesome. We've got that in the comments for folks that were catching this on the social media side. We've again, actonplacer.com. If you're hearing this through the podcast, you can just remember that one as well. Matt, really appreciate you taking the time. This has been fascinating.
Pleasure is mine, Tobin. Thanks for everything you're doing, man.